Right, so you've been looking around for a property to buy, and you may have seen this term period conversion coming up again and again. What does it actually mean? What is it referring to? I'll explain both the period part and the conversion part straight after this short intro. I'm Tim Hill, internet entrepreneur, property investor, and author of How to Really Buy a Property. No, it's not one of those books that goes on and on about how you can make millions investing in property, and all you have to do is go on my course to learn the secrets, and then you go on my course and you find out that you have to go on my master course to learn the real secrets. None of that. If you have decided to buy a property, no matter what your motivation, then How to Really Buy a Property is the smart way to do it. And it will save you time, money, and stress. Okay, let's start with period properties. Now we're talking generally about three periods in history. The Georgian period, check that, 1714 to 1830s. The Victorian period, 1830s to 1900, 1901. And the Edwardian period, 1901 to 1910. These are the three periods of history when a lot of buildings were constructed that are still around today. Now, before that time, you will sometimes find older buildings referred to as period, but more generally, they're more specific. So a Tudor property will be referred to as a Tudor conversion. You will also find that sometimes people refer to Georgian conversion, Victorian conversion, Edwardian conversion. Okay, but the umbrella over that is period conversion. After that, people generally talk about early 1900s. They might refer to the decade, 1920s, 1930s, pre-war, before 1939, post-war, after 1945, for about the first 2 decades. Nothing official about that definition, but post-war, first 2 decades after the war. Then we talk about the decades again, 1970s, 1980s, or sometimes purpose-built. That generally refers to something, but not always, generally refers to something that's more modern within the last 70, 80 years. And then we come right up to the last decade where things are often referred to as new build. Okay, so period, we've got that. Okay, it's generally that 1700s to early 1900s. What do we mean by conversion? That's when the property was not built to be what it is today. Okay, now in the Edwardian, Victorian, Georgian times, a lot of houses were built to be houses, and there was the aristocracy around, they could afford it. But as London grew and the population density grew and houses became more expensive, people started dividing up the houses into flats. So you might have a very common Victorian house would be divided into 2 flats. A Georgian house, they can be 4 or 5 stories high, they could be divided into 3 or 4 flats. That's the conversion, converted from a house into flats. So, period, old property, converted, conversion into flats. Why do people point it out? Well, there are various reasons, because you can have a love or hate relationship with period conversions. Obviously, people love them because very often they've got nice things, wooden doors, wooden floorboards, lovely bay windows, they might have a nice fireplace. A period conversion doesn't have to have that. All that can be stripped out and have been replaced with like something 1970s really bland and horrible, and still be called a period conversion. But there's some things you can't take away, like the bay windows or the sash windows or something like that. Or you can take away sash windows and replace them with horrible plastic. But generally speaking, there's some more character going on in a period conversion. The downside is that the building was never built to be flats. And that can mean that the noise insulation between the floors can be questionable sometimes. You can hear an awful lot of what your neighbour downstairs is watching on TV. If you're the one that lives downstairs, you might be able to hear the pet dog of the person who lives above you pattering around all day. There can be issues regarding the plumbing as well. This place was never built to be flat, so the plumbing's been hacked around to make it all work, or the electrics has been moved around to make it all work. So there are quite a few different issues involved in period conversions, but people's love affair with these old properties means that some people absolutely love them, and some people will avoid them like the plague because they'll want to go for a purpose built, something that was made to be flats. In which case they know that there are certain building regulations that have been followed. A lot of the older period conversions would have happened at a time when there weren't so many regulations in place. Whereas if I buy a flat that was built in the last 10 years, I know that there's some minimum regulations that had to be followed. And I could see that as an advantage. Of course, minimum regulations, there does still allow for you to hear plenty of what your neighbours are doing. You have to get to know the actual builders to know which ones make better properties, but there is still that minimum. And also the plumbing was put in place for flats, the electrics was made for flats. There could just be less issues going forward into the future. So that's your period conversion. You love them, you hate them, but that's what they are. That's all for this short video. There's much more information in the book, How to Really Buy a Property. As always, if you found this information useful, please remember to subscribe, to share, to like, to do all those social media things. It all helps other people who need this information find it more easily. If you've got some specific questions which you'd like me to have a go at answering, please put them in the comments below and I'll try and get to them. And in the meantime, good luck with your property purchase.